Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everyone. So yeah, this is my first time at Cairo, and I'll be giving you more of a perspective of a user of these forecasts and how they're impacting our operations in the Colorado River Basin. So I'm working out of the University of Colorado in Boulder, but I'm stationed at Reclamation's Upper Colorado Basin region, which is here in Salt Lake City. I also work with folks out of the Lower Colorado River Basin as well. And when we look at the Colorado River Basin, can I see it advance on here too? Sorry, I was trying to see if I could have it advance on the one that's in front of me, but I guess I'll just click this here. Not let me. Okay. I am working across 7 western states. We are working throughout the areas that we're contributing or we're using agricultural uses throughout the Upper Colorado River Basin. We're working with municipal uses. Agricultural uses are accounting for about 70% of the use, and M&I uses are another about 20%. We also have reservoir losses that are accounting for a significant portion of the use as well. The operational setting for the basin is serving about 40 million people across those 7 states. And sorry, they're moving things right in front of me. There we go. And we are, sorry, I need to go to the next slide. There we go. Perfect. And we are working with 30 basin tribes and with the country of Mexico, which borders the lower portion of the Colorado River Basin and is a partner in water use throughout the basin. Snowpack is contributing about 80% of the flow, and it's a critical reservoir for the use of water in the basin. As you saw this year, we're struggling with what we have, but the reservoir systems in the Colorado River Basin can hold about 4 years of storage. Right now with the drought, it's almost about 5 years of storage, given the flows we've been seeing the last 25 years. And we have 2 reservoirs that contain about 85% of that storage, which are the largest reservoirs in the United States, both Lake Powell and Lake Mead. Currently, these reservoirs are about 35% full, and we are presently working towards the end of a set of operational guidelines that we've had in place since 2007, which will expire at the end of this year. We've been working over the last 3 years trying to find an agreement among the 7 basin states for how to operate the system, but that has not been easy and it's been rather elusive, and we're still actually actively trying to see if we can get some sort of agreement on how we can use the water together. As far as the legal system, it is one of the most complex legal frameworks in the world governing a river basin, and we have key portions of what we call the law of the river, which govern this basin. In 1922, there was a compact that split the water use between the upper basin and the lower basin, and then in 1944, the treaty with Mexico was set in place, which allotted 1.5 million acre feet to Mexico. The upper basin has 7.5, the lower basin has 7.5. In 1948, the upper basin decided how to share among their 4 states and the northern part of Arizona that has water. And in 1964, a Supreme Court decree actually dictated how the lower basin was going to share water and the allocations they would have. The system is over-allocated. We've allocated 16.5 million acre feet. We're presently getting about a little over 12.5 on average during this drought period. So we're well over-allocated. And in 68, we actually began the process to dictate that Lakes Powell and Mead will work in a coordinated fashion. And since that time, we've been working through many different agreements of how to continue to have this coordination and how to share this water. And right now, we're kind of against a spot that we've never been, with the lowest levels in the lake, a 25-year drought, and trying to figure out how to work with this system that is not providing what we thought it could provide. So what we work with is two modeling systems. One's called the Colorado River Midterm Modeling System, or CRIMS, and the other is Colorado River Simulation System, or CRSS. I'll be focusing on the midterm system, which is relying on forecasts from the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center. This system has two modes we work with. One we call the 24-month study. We do a study every month. And then the other is the ensemble mode. The 24-month study looks at 3 ensemble-based forecasts, deterministic forecasts that are built from an ensemble, and we term them the min, most, and max probable. They really represent the 90th, 50th, and 10th percentiles from an ensemble. We can also move the ensemble through our operations model to be able to look at 30 traces of possible futures. So what we work with the Colorado Midterm Modeling System, which I'll focus on today, we in operations space have built this in a tool we call Riverware. It's a software mechanism that was built by the University of Colorado's Center for Advanced Decision-Making Water and Environmental Systems. In the Upper Basin, it covers 12 reservoirs, and it allows us to operate the system. First, we can have our operators doing it by hand, then we can use logic to actually look at 30 traces. And again, this is done monthly, and it's relying on the CBRC forecasts. So that CBRC forecast we work with is coming from the ensemble streamflow prediction technique, and it's a technique that relies on state information for the system. So looking at soil moisture, snowpack as our state information, and then using historical temperature and precipitation traces to move through 30 traces. So we have no skill that we see in temperature and precipitation. We're just running history through. Our skill comes from the state information of where is the system. And we have 12 inflow points in the upper basin, 7 in the lower, and here we're just showing the area that's being covered. We develop the forecast from this ESP work, and here what I'm showing is what we call the evolution plot, the water supply evolution plot for Lake Powell. This is the plot that was provided in January of 2026, and we're looking at a range of volumes of flow over different lead times. And what this does is it starts to give us a picture in January of what we can expect for this period, April through July, which is the shaded region here. And what we see here is we started off with a 57% of average inflow. It was primarily because we had low soil moisture, and we had anticipated that would have an impact of reducing flows. But we really didn't have a clear picture of where we were going to head for the remainder of the year. And January is about a 5-month lead time towards what we needed to know for April through July. And we work to move this through our operating system. This forecast, this evolution, lets us see a range from the maximum, which is really built from the maximum temperature and precipitation data, and then a minimum from the minimum precipitation temperature data, along with an ensemble. We move through the 50th percentile through our modeling tool, and then also look at the 10th and 90th. So that modeling tool then develops a figure that we can see here. This figure is showing us the min, most, and max. The min, the red line, the most, the green, the blue, the max. Again, 10th, 50th, 90th. Behind that, we see a cloud that represents the ESP ensemble, so a picture of uncertainty. We actually plan our operations to that most, that green line, and at this point when we were planning our operations, we were also looking at the fact that the min was dropping below a critical line that we have in this reservoir. This is the min power pool. At the min power pool below this point, we no longer generate power, but we also lose redundancy in the way we release water downstream. We actually can release through penstocks to go through our turbines. We also have bypass tubes. The bypass tubes are all that's available once we drop below min power pool. We don't want to be reliant on just that one form of passing water through the dam. So we're going to be looking very closely at this level. And at this point, we knew that that forecast could change, and we were being cautious about what we did. At this point, we were projecting Lake Powell is going to release 7.4 million acre feet down to the lower basin. We were making adjustments already in our monthly flows to shift our flows to later in the year in case the forecast dropped. We've seen forecasts drop. We were kind of anticipated that's a possibility, and we don't trust probability anymore. You hear people speak about risk. It's something we're very cautious with, and we don't use risk the way it's traditionally been used. And then we also knew that what this did, it would maintain Powell about 1.2 million acre feet above this minimum power pool. So that was a level we felt comfortable with at the most, but we saw this range and knew there was a possibility of going lower. So I'll just reiterate the way the dam works. We're looking here at a side-facing view of Glen Canyon Dam. You have the penstocks, which move through the turbines, and then you have those bypass tubes. 3490 is that min power pool, and we have a buffer towards 3490 because we can't get all the way to that level. Before that level, we have to shut off our penstock operations because we get vortices that damage the turbines, and then we become reliant just on these bypass tubes. And those are not too far below the level we have for the turbine and the penstock releases. This is just a front view of the face of the dam, so you can start to see these are the turbine penstock entryways that we see, and then 3490 is the level that is the min power pool. And then you also see over here on the left-hand side the bypass tube entrances, and those are the ones we rely on if we drop below the min power pool, but the dam is not built to operate just with the bypass tubes. So we're really working to protect that 3490 level. So this is the forecast we got in May, and you see a precipitous drop. This is likely going to be the lowest year we've seen in the last 30 years. So in our 30-year period, which is typically used for climatology for these types of forecasts. And we saw each month how this forecast just kept dropping. This is something that is a problem for us, not being able to get a skillful forecast early in the season. So this is an area that we have been actively trying to research, and I'll speak a little bit to that, but it's just one of the things that's really impacting our operations. We have this range of uncertainty that we can see. The pink lines represent what we call the official forecast. The blue is the guidance from the ESP operation, but all of those were dropping as we watch the state information, the snowpack, the lack of snowpack building up, driving the model simulations. What we saw in May is we dropped to an 800,000 acre foot expected inflow for April through July, so dropped to a 13% of average flow. We started at 57. So there was a precipitous drop, and it's something that if we could understand earlier, it would be very critically helpful to us. So we lost about 2.5 million acre feet of unregulated inflow in the April to July period through this 5-month period. And that's something that we didn't have a clear indicator until we moved through this snowpack season. And that's a piece that we really would like to see improvement if we could have that arrive. What that did is it impacted our operations significantly. You're now seeing that we've modified operations to again try and protect this min power pool level. And we did that by multiple pieces of change through the operation. One of the key ones was we reduced the releases from Powell that are expected this year. We had started at 748. We've dropped it to 6 million acre feet. That's a 1.48 million acre foot drop. And remember, the lower basin uses about 7.5 a year. So this is a significant drop in water that we're going to be releasing to the lower basin. At the same time, we are now actually going to be releasing water from Flaming Gorge upstream in the Utah, Wyoming area. We'll be releasing 600 to 1 million acre feet to make up for this deficit that we saw in the snowpack. We'll only be able to do that about 3 times. That reservoir does not have more than a little over 3 million acre feet of additional water to provide, and it's not a typical thing we would ever do. This will be the second time that we've done releases like this to be able to protect and supplement flows at Lake Powell to try and keep levels above this min power pool, the 3490. So what this leads to is just the research to operations piece. This is something that's been critical to our group and we've been working with. And when we look at this effort, we have a group called the Colorado River Climate and Hydrology Work Group. The group was formed in 2017. It's informal and voluntary, but it includes users, managers of water, along with Reclamation, and the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center as participants on this group. And what it really is trying to do is it's a need, consensus-driven group, and it's striving to improve the data and methods that we're employing with these operational models. So we're looking at the CHIPS framework that CBRC is working with. We're looking at the CRIMS framework, which I've described a little bit here, the Colorado Midterm Modeling System. And we're also looking at our long-term planning tool, the Colorado River Simulation System, which is currently being used to reevaluate, can we come up with new operations post-26 to actually run the system, to run reservoirs like Lake Powell and Lake Mead. So the way this work group works, its goal is to advance scientific understanding and to improve the accuracy of hydrological forecasts and projections. It's to enhance the performance of predictive tools and to better understand the uncertainty related to future supply and demand conditions in the Colorado River Basin. And we do this beginning with understanding the status and the knowledge of activities in the basin. So really understanding the research, understanding what's understood and known. And then we work with this work group to consider the needs of the work group. And then we work collaboratively to pursue research projects. We work to fund them together, and we work to manage them together. One of the things we did was in April 2020, we released this report called the Colorado River Climate and Hydrology State of the Science Report. This has been a seminal report for us. It's something we'll be revisiting in the near future. It identified key challenges and opportunities in the basin. It was jointly funded by Reclamation and this consortium of state and local water agencies. It was led by Western Water Assessment, so ARISA, over at the University of Colorado, but it was really reviewed and authored by many researchers who had expertise and skills in the Colorado River Basin. And it's been a foundational source of information for researchers interested in working with the basin and understanding our needs as stakeholders in the basin. So recent research that we've keyed on is we actually brought a research hydrologist into CBRC, a reclamation employee that we hired that's there to actually build an experimental test bed in the RFC. And the idea is we're building that experimental test bed with the tools they use, the SAC SMA model, and being able to do experimental work in operations alongside with the operators. At the same time, we've done a similar test bed in our operations tool. So in the CRIMS model, we have a test bed there as well. That test bed is some views from a test bed are shown on the right, some reliability bias figures of some recent work we did to be able to move to using the ESP product through the entire 2-year period. We used to only use it for year 1. We're going to be moving to using it for year 1 and 2. And it's not extremely predictive, but in the fall of the second year, it still has a little more skill than climatology, which is what we relied on previously. We're very interested in bringing auto-calibration into this CHIPS framework to be able to allow us to look at new products. And then we're also working on web-based tools to actually evaluate experimental forecasts alongside ESP and the products used by CBRFC. Again, to just let us look at more new ideas and trying to evaluate them against what we're currently doing. Some of those ideas we'd like to explore. We've already done work detrending the temperature series that's used in ESP and being able to add a temperature trend for the future. We're interested in bringing dynamic ET into the tool and also doing consumption use and loss improvements. And our niche is kind of between where you all are and what's being used right now, recognizing your products aren't really coming into what we are seeing today and what we need today. So we're trying to work towards bringing those products in more quickly and trying to evaluate those against what we use both at the CBRC side and at Reclamation side. This is a view of all our partners. And in closing, I just want to give some key questions I want you all to be able to think about as you're going through the next few days. So with forecast skill, very interested in seeing, can we improve the 5-month lead of forecast skill? Is that something that's possible? Can we better communicate these rare but plausible risks when we're in extended drought? This year is a prime example. We're going to see likely the lowest flow we've seen in the last 30 years. How do we better communicate to our stakeholders that this is something that occur and they need to be prepared for it? And then how do we integrate skillful long lead temperature and precipitation forecasts into a tool like ESP? Right now, if we had tools like that, and we've tried to use some of the information coming out of global climate models, decadal prediction, but we still are not seeing skill that's beating out what we're doing with the ESP product. And then for evaluation engagement, we really feel like it's critical to develop experimental forecast evaluation tools, like the test bed we're trying to build at the CBRC, like the one we've done with our operational model, and to be doing that to really understand performance of new products against what's currently being done. I feel like that's a gap still that exists. We need to be able to see what it looks like. And then we need to engage stakeholders early when we're exploring these research needs. And by stakeholders, I mean folks like the water agencies who rely on the operations projections that reclamation does, not just reclamation getting the forecast from the CBRFC. And then we also need, in our view, strong precipitation from folks like the RFC. They are the folks that are kind of on the front lines for us as far as providing the forecasts, and they're the ones that are hearing from our stakeholders, from us, of our needs. And we really feel like that's an area where they have not been as supported in the experimental space. It's kind of been done above them, but we really want to do it with them and then have them integrating information like you're developing it and bringing it down to the level where we can then show our stakeholders what's being done and trying to find these incremental improvements. And I think with that, I'll just leave this figure, shows Lake Mead in 1983 spilling, and about 150 feet of drop has occurred since that period. We're in 2021 right now, and by 2026, we've lost 65% of the storage that we had in these reservoirs. So we're at a fairly dire point right now, and if we have another year like this, the next year or two, it's going to be very detrimental to the basin, and there'll be a lot of hard choices that are trying to be made now, but will definitely have to be made at this point. Thank you.